Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. I'm Juliet Corbett. I'm an executive coach and strategist, and I work one-to-one with senior leaders, guiding them to find their strategic focus, empower their teams, and regain control over their time.
And I'm Lucy Gower. I'm a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I empower leaders to build their happy, confident and high-performing teams. Today we're going to be talking specifically about coaching and how as a leader you can unlock the power of the individuals in your team. So Juliet, talk to me about, first of all, I think coaching can have lots of different sort of meanings and connotations. So I think first up, let's define what we're talking about for this episode. How will you define coaching?
Yeah. So coaching is a way of being, a way of interacting with your team. It's not about being a coach. That's not what we're talking about today. It's the skill set that you might have as a leader as you are leading your team. And what makes coaching skills different from other leadership skills is that it's about enabling the team members to find their own answers, to think through things in a more kind of a broader way, a different way, different perspectives, and then take action. And the key element of it is, if we're talking about pure coaching, which we will be extending beyond in this episode, if we're talking about pure coaching, it's often described as non-directive, which means that you as the leader are not directing what your team member will say or do. You are creating an environment in which they can say what they think needs to be said at that moment, needs to kind of be verbalized in the conversation. So in a way, it's about helping the leader to release a bit of control, release a bit of their own sense of what needs to happen. It's not kind of the opposite of giving advice or giving instructions. It's creating a conversation where the people in the team can really do really great thinking and step up and take action themselves.
When I talk about coaching, I often say something like, it's, I believe you that you've got all of the answers. You just need the time and space and to be asked some curious questions in order to help you to unlock that. And it's perhaps, offering that kind of guidance, not in terms of the advice, but in terms of the types of questions that you're asking to help the person unlock what they already know a lot of the time.
And it might actually be that the leader thinks they know but actually is that their team member also knows, and the knowing might be different between the two. And so that's where you kind of the multiplication effect comes in. Like you may think as the leader, I do know the answer to this, but I'm going to lead this team member through a process by asking some questions. We're going to talk about the core kind of skills in coaching, but asking questions, listening, being really curious. And actually you're probably going to end up somewhere different to where you thought you were going to end up. And that's the power.
I agree. And I think it's like, all of us as individuals will have, I know my answer to this, but actually my answer might not be the optimum answer. My lens on the world is different to what is unique. It's different. All of us have our own unique lens on the world, built up by our skills and experience and all the experiences that we've had so far. So there is something in that coaching dynamic about, what is the optimum solution answer for the person that you are working with, which may be different to yours. And actually, if everybody always thinks in the same way, that in itself is a red flag. Either people are not thinking for themselves or something about the cultural style of leadership is encouraging groupthink, or we'll all agree with what the leader says. And that's exactly, in my mind, what a coaching approach is trying to steer away from. It's like you said, creating the environment where people feel safe. It's back to psychological safety, which I know that we've talked about before, and having the time and space to be curious and explore your ideas to come up with an action or a solution and move forward.
Exactly that. And it's not a coincidence that this conversation is going to tie together a lot of the strands, the threads that we've talked about many times in this podcast. The psychological safety is one of those. It's not a coincidence because you and I both naturally take quite a coaching approach. And actually what we talked about last time around facilitation, there's a lot of overlap with kind of group coaching and facilitation. It's about creating an environment in which you can unlock the potential and the power and the ideas and the perspectives of everybody in that room. And what I love about this kind of way of empowering others is it connects through to many of the other things we've talked about. So complex challenges, when we're dealing with complex problems and challenges, what we really need is multiple perspectives, as well as an ability to take action and learn as we go. And those multiple perspectives come out through the coaching or the facilitation conversations that you're having. It's also about releasing the weight from the leader. I work with a lot of leaders who feel quite heavy. There's a lot of responsibility that weighs on them. And we talked many months ago now about great leaders don't have all the answers. It's about asking great questions. And when you realize actually you're there as a leader to create an environment in which great ideas can emerge, you're not there to have all the great ideas yourself. There's something that lifts the weight off leaders when they realize the truth of that.
Take the pressure off. You don't have to have all the solutions. Your job is to help other people come to those solutions. And I suppose last time we talked about how create safety and an environment in groups, and coaching is much more about the one-to-one relationship.
Exactly.
So who first?
So one thing, just really quickly before we move on, I talked about the idea of pure coaching. I just really wanted to really quickly, I kind of say, so when I did my coach training, so I did training and accreditation with EMCC, which is the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. What they teach you is pure coaching. So it is about purely non-directive. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a sense of what the outcome needs to be. I'm guiding someone through that process. I don't very often do that in my work as a trusted advisor, and leaders certainly wouldn't be doing that pure coaching. So it is fine if you are using these skills, but actually you can put your ideas in the room as well, just as I do when I'm a trusted advisor. I'm not abdicating my responsibility to put my expertise in that conversation. I will do when it's appropriate, but it's about balancing. So leaders shouldn't feel that they have to hold back from ever giving advice or directing the conversation in one particular way. This is just one tool that you can use in your toolkit, which you will want to draw on more or less depending on the situation. So I think just to make really clear up front, this is not a should. You should do it this way. This is permission to play with a really powerful toolkit that is coaching, and to see how it fits in the way that you are leading and line managing the people you're working with. So I just want to make that really clear.
That's really helpful, that as a leader, so if I'm going to paraphrase that, or not that paraphrase, but repeat back to you, my understanding of what you've just said is that pure coaching is when you have almost like you're completely objective. You have no kind of opinions or expertise to bring to the table. You are purely asking open questions to help the person you are coaching explore and think. As a leader, that's going to be really difficult because you've got a set of objectives and things that you are guiding your team towards achieving, and therefore your opinions are important, but it doesn't mean that your opinion is the right way to do it. And I suppose there's a caveat in how you present that when you're coaching with someone. Say, like, my thought is this, what do you think about that? But not putting your thought first. I feel like we talked about it in a facilitation session or a group idea session about hippos go last. So the most influential person goes last, and that applies in coaching and enabling your coachee to explore first. And this isn't you going, and thanks for all your thoughts, but my right answer is this. It's saying, all your thoughts are great. I've got a different perspective here to throw in. What do you think about that?
Exactly that. So first of all, I love that you're already using one of the core coaching skills, which is summarizing back to me what you've heard. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but that's a lovely example. You heard me say something, you summarized it back to me to check understanding and to expand the conversation, to expand our shared understanding of what we're talking about, which is itself a really important coaching tool. But you're exactly right. If you're doing pure coaching, you're the expert in the guiding process. But actually, a leader can be an expert in guiding their team, but they can also be an expert in the actual functional area or organizational knowledge that's needed to come to a really great solution or a really great answer to a problem. So you will always, as a leader, be holding these two together, wearing those two hats simultaneously. So it's about finding a fluidity and probably sharing with your team. Okay, now I'm gonna ask a few more coaching style questions. So you might even want to say it to role model to them. This is what's happening. So that you're actually intentionally able to wear the coaching hat and wear the directive hat. It's not saying that one is better or worse than the other. It's saying this is another thing that you can do to get the best potential out of your team.
I liked what you said there earlier about, something in your toolkit as a leader that you can use. Sometimes coaching isn't the best approach. Like, the building's on fire, let's not have a conversation about how we feel about it. Let's just get out really quickly.
Yes.
But there's also something about style. So I think I've ended up coaching because my personal style is a coaching style. And I know that you too, I remember when I first met you, and perhaps before you were qualified as a coach many, many years ago now.
Yeah.
And I always remember thinking, well, Juliet asks really good questions. And I've not thought about it like that. So I'm going to hazard a guess that it's your style too, that then you can kind of dial up with learning, a whole load of learning and experience.
I think that's true. And just like any skill, there'll be some people for whom it comes more naturally and others for whom they'll need to work a little bit more. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think coaching does come completely naturally to me. I think I'm a natural advice giver, but I think that's offset by the fact that I'm naturally really curious, like quite annoyingly curious. And so there's this natural balance of those two in me. And then doing the coach training was actually quite important for me. You don't have to do coach training to be an amazing coach, but for me it was quite important to unlearn some of the advice giving tendencies that I have. And actually I think it can also be true that some of the things we do best are not always the things that come naturally, because by becoming really good, we've had to teach ourselves something. We've had to learn. And in the process, we've found ways to take the skills which are innate and then up level them. So I wouldn't actually say I'm a natural coach. I think I am now a good coach.
100%.
But I think as well, if I was tasked with doing pure coaching, I still find that very hard, which is why actually my sweet spot is what I would call trusted advisor. So I can use coaching, but I can also be quite directive in those conversations. And actually I find that's the best use of the skills that I have. So I think if you're listening and you think, oh, I don't find this easy, don't despair. Actually, sometimes the things that we don't find natural or easy can be the things that we could lead into and have great impact on what you're doing.
I think there's another thing within there, though, that maybe is implicit in what you've said. You might not find something easy and you can choose to become an expert at it, but you have to feel passionate or interested in it as a discipline or as something that you want to improve on. So if you said, I'm really good at advising and I'm really curious, but I'm not interested in coaching, I'd still think that you were a good coach from your response. And maybe it's because we think very differently, that you always bring a new lens that helps me think about something in a different way. And I think actually I do the same. It's a reciprocated. But if you didn't want to keep learning, then you could have a choice to not be a coach and do something entirely different.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, we're getting off the topic here slightly, but my curiosity means that I'm always interested in learning.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's that kind of core value that I have kind of really feeds into a hyper growth mindset of
hyper growth I can learn mindset.
Anything. And I can do anything if I put my mind to it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to, because time is
you haven't invented
I have to make choices.
The time machine yet. So let's come back to coaching. I did go on a bit of a tangent because I had like this sort of little light bulb moment where I was like, oh yeah, that's true. And so in terms of, let's think about skills for coaching. Talk to us a little bit more about.
So I reckon that there's a huge amount of overlap, that skills for leadership is the same as skills for coaching, but I reckon there's 4 specific skills which are particularly the ones you want to be dialing up for coaching. So to list those really quickly, so you know all 4, and then we'll maybe dive into each in turn. One is listening deeply, like really dialing into listening to what's going on around you. The second is asking powerful questions. So we've talked about questions already, being an important part of coaching. The third is summarizing and reflecting, of which, Lucy, you have given us a lovely masterclass earlier in this session, taking what something's given to you, rephrasing it, or intentionally using their words, depending on how you want to do it, to reflect it back to them. And then the fourth one is being really goal focused with clear ownership. Now, that overlaps with leadership, but it's so important because there is a risk that coaching moments just feel like talking chops, and they're not. Coaching, a core element of coaching is that it is goal focused and action focused. And in fact, that's one of the key ways in which it's different from counselling.
Yes.
It's forward looking, it's looking ahead into what's going to happen next rather than looking back into what's happened previously. And so inherently there's a goal action kind of orientation to it.
Okay, that makes
So those are the 4 areas. Which one to do first? Should we do in order, or is there one of those that you think?
I want to go in order, if that's all right, and starting with listening, because I know that we've talked about this in a specific episode that we'll share in the notes.
Yeah.
And I think listening skills, like, we don't learn listening skills, like we spend a lot of time learning like reading and writing, and it seems counterintuitive to, it's such an important skill, but yet we don't ever learn it, apart from if we're learning coaching or counselling type skills. But yet being listened to just is a game changer, I think.
It is. And if someone really, really listens to you, it can unlock completely new ideas and thoughts and perspectives that are all coming from inside you, and yet they feel fresh and new. So just listening to someone, forget the questions, forget the reflections, just listening to someone is incredibly powerful.
Agree.
And I think it's about, we use the word listening, but I would include with that body language.
Agreed.
So it's almost like listening with our eyes.
Agreed.
So it's watching somebody as they're expressing through their talking, but looking at everything that they're doing as being a way that they're communicating to you. And also listening for what they're not saying. So what are the gaps that actually they're not exploring? It's part of it too.
And I think that this is a discipline, and I think that this is something that if you're listening to this, it's worth practicing. And it's not like, oh, I've reached 10 out of 10 in listening skills, I don't need to do it anymore. It's a constantly evolving thing. And I think it's very difficult when you're in a leadership position and you're juggling a million different things. You've got lots of emails flying, you're checking your phone. Like, we are all in a society where we check our phones too much, in my opinion, and just being able to almost retrain your brain to go, right, I'm going to 100% focus on what Juliet is saying right now in this moment.
Yeah.
When she's finished, I'll think about the questions that I ask. I'm not going to try and think about what I'm going to ask while I'm listening. And that takes discipline and practice, and it's difficult if you're not used to it. It's a game changer, I think, for your own brain and how you're working, as well as how that feels for the other person, especially because most of us have partial attention deficit and we're trying to do more than one thing at the same time, including listening.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest tip for listening is to put all of your attention on the other person while simultaneously turning off the what am I going to say next pattern that goes on in our heads. And actually, I think, and actually, listeners, you can listen in to check if I'm right here. I think you and I have just slowed down.
Yeah, we have.
I don't know if you've noticed.
Because
we've slowed the pace of what we're doing because that we're talking about listening, and so we are dialing in to be more present.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So I think we did a really thorough episode on listening skills as a leader. It is an under-recognized skill, and even if you don't want to do any kind of coaching, it doesn't feel like one of the things you want to be doing as a leader, that's fine. You still need to learn the listening element. So actually, I wonder at this point whether we refer people back to keep listening to this one now, but afterwards go and listen to the listening episode, because I think we explored all sorts of different elements in there that we're not going to have time necessarily to capture.
Fully agree. So listening deeply, number one. The second thing that you said was about asking powerful questions. Talk to us more about what you mean by powerful questions.
So firstly, I'm going to take the pressure off because I felt this when I first did my coach training. It was all powerful. I've got now the pressure's on
Yeah.
me as the coach slash leader to find a powerful question to ask back to this person. Yes, we want powerful questions, but I would say it's ask an intuitive question. Like, don't overthink this. There are hundreds of lists of coaching questions on the internet. You can go and find them. I can talk you through a couple of my favorites in a moment, but actually just follow your intuition to ask what feels like a good question to ask next. So don't over pressurize the idea of asking a powerful question. One of the things I would say is always try and ask open questions if you can, because we're looking to invite the other person to explore something. So a closed question would have a yes, no answer, or a number, for example, as an answer. Whereas an open question, someone would have to answer with at least one sentence and probably more. So you're always looking for open questions. Generally speaking, we try to avoid asking why questions. This is something I've taught as a rule, and I thought, I don't need rules, I'll break the rules. Actually, this is a really good rule to keep following, regardless of how experienced you are. Why questions, they do two things which are really interesting. Firstly, they can result in someone being a bit defensive. I think that's as a child, you're kind of taught, when you ask a why question, you go in defensive mode in response. But the other interesting thing is it often invites someone to re-verbalize all of the thinking they've already had. So they'll tell you the 15 reasons why they can't do this thing, but they've already thought of the 15 reasons why, because it's been running around their head for the last month, whatever it might be. They're not, or why questions are not great for inviting fresh, new thinking.
What are your questions that replace the natural default for many of us to ask why?
Yeah. It's really hard at first, but there's always an alternative. So you're looking for often maybe a how question. So rather than why did that happen? You can say, or you could say what. So what occurred to bring us to this situation? Or you could say, how could we do this differently next time? Or what's really important in this? Actually, that's one of my favorite questions. People, if you've given them time, if you've got time as a leader, I know time is scarce, if you've got time to listen, people will share a lot of detail, which is great as a first step, but you want to narrow them in to something that's important. So what feels important in this? And is a great way to narrow people.
That's a great question. And I think sometimes when you've asked me that, I've surprised myself by what is important. And that in itself then almost starts the conversation again on a different footing, which is in itself helpful.
And I try, and there may be examples I get this wrong, I try to phrase it, what feels important here? Not what do you think is important? Because that's almost like first of all, it's asking about your thinking rather than your feelings. So it's accessing a different part of the processing that you're doing as you're being coached or as you're kind of answering these questions. But it's also, if you say what feels important, there's no right or wrong question. No one can say you've given the wrong answer to what feels important. You didn't pick one of my top 3 things that I think is important. It's like, no. What feels important here takes away any judgment of getting the one right thing to say in the answer.
Because how you feel, this is how I feel. There's no right or wrong. This is how I feel.
No, exactly. And there's no need to evidence base it as well. Like, I don't need the 15 pieces of evidence to justify why you feel that way. No, you feel that way. Okay, this feels important. Even if you can't articulate why, it's a gut instinct reaction. That's really, really helpful. And along those lines, there's another great question, which is, what more do you think, feel, or want to say? Which comes from Nancy Klein's work on thinking environments, making time to think. And again, it's that think, feel, or want to say. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, there's no evidence needed. It's just what feels like it needs to be said at this moment.
And in my experience, that can be quite a shift when often in leadership, there's so much around sort of data and rationale and making a case. And actually, in these one-to-one conversations, how people feel and gut feeling is really important, and not the most important thing, perhaps.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that can sometimes feel like a bit of a shift in mindset.
Yeah, because it's accessing your cognitive process thinking, but it's also accessing the intuition and
Yeah,
the stuff we can't evidence, the gut instinct,
yeah,
the emotion that comes with something.
yeah,
So it's allowing people to share that in a really safe
yeah.
way, which is great.
And so if you're listening to this and you're a leader who is maybe thinking about taking more of a coaching approach in terms of, I'm wondering if powerful questions is not the right thing. It's because I agree with what you said
Mm,
about, oh,
curious, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
curious questions. Because like a
Yeah.
powerful question is like, oh my goodness, is this question powerful enough? Or I'm just asking like a basic question.
Yeah.
What's the advice that you would give to somebody starting to play with this approach?
Okay. So I think that it can be helpful. If you really want to go with this properly, it can be helpful to go online and download some lists of coaching
Yeah.
questions because it will give you other ideas for things that you could ask. So there's some really powerful questions. You know, what would you do if you knew you couldn't
Mm,
fail? What would you do if money was no object? What's really important in terms of what you're trying to achieve? There are some amazing coaching
mm,
questions out there. I'm not going to be able to repeat them all now, but it can be useful to look at those
yeah.
lists of
Great.
powerful questions or curious questions. But in the moment, what you're not doing is got your list in front of you and asking a question because it's the next one on the list. What you're trying to do is use your intuition. And if you can use that kind of avoid the closed questions, you're asking open questions, you're avoiding why,
Mm-hmm.
and then play. And you can even, so what is the question? What is the question you most want me to ask you?
Yeah, I love that.
I love that. What is the question you don't want me to ask you?
Yes, I love that as well.
Throw it back to the person that you're leading because actually you're learning this coaching skill
Yeah.
together. Um, and if you really want a framework, some people love frameworks, some people
Mm,
don't. The simplest one to use is probably the GROW framework.
yeah.
So, goal questions, G, reality questions. What is the current situation? What have we tried so far? What happened? O is for options.
Mhm.
What could we do? What are the
Different
brainstorming
choices.
of the
Yeah.
lots of different things we could do? And W is will. So what will we do or the way forward? And you can ask questions that follow that GROW
Yeah.
framework. It gets a bit repetitive, if I'm honest, eventually. But if you really want a framework to start with, that's probably the one I recommend.
Frameworks can be really helpful to just kind of get
It
going. And then
can.
I think the thing
Yeah.
here that's really important is finding your own favorite questions, your own words, your own style. So it
Yeah.
starts to feel like a natural thing and not a thing that you need a model in order to be able to feel that you're
Yeah.
doing it okay.
Yeah,
Mm,
definitely, definitely. And you need fewer questions than you realize as well, because after you've asked a question, you can always ask what else,
yes,
and you can ask that multiple times.
yes,
So actually, you probably need fewer questions than you might
agreed.
think.
And I would, or I often default to what else because the person will never say everything all in one go. And often, when if you ask somebody what else, you see them look up as they're like, let me think what else. And they're digging deep. And that is a
Yes.
good thing because you're scratched under the surface. And what's really going on beneath what sometimes people present is kind of what you want to get at. That's why I like that question
Yeah.
about what's the thing you don't want me to
Yeah.
ask. Well, it's the fear that I've got hidden great right down deep inside that I
Yeah.
feel safe enough to say what that is now.
Yeah, definitely. There have been times, I'm happy to admit this because obviously no one's listening, but there have been times when I've not been sure what my next question is, and I'm feeling a little bit lost as to
Yeah,
what direction I want to take. So I'll just kind of say what else, almost as a filler, because I'm
you're
still
buying
processing
time.
what
Yeah,
direction and what my question is exactly, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then what comes back is like, oh my goodness, that's something completely
yeah.
new that I wouldn't have unearthed
Hey,
that, or we wouldn't have unearthed that if I
yeah.
hadn't
Listen,
asked that as a filler question. So I think that's,
I was,
yeah, don't worry if you're doing that because I do that too.
yeah. Just to share, because no one's listening, I do that too, and that's happened to me on many occasions. Where I've just gone, oh, what
Yeah,
else? And off we go. We found the nub of what's going on, and then
yeah,
you
yeah,
build from that.
yeah, exactly.
So
Glad to know it's not just me.
it's not
That's
just
good.
you, that's for sure, 100%. Summarizing and reflecting. So I accidentally did this
Yeah,
earlier. Wasn't planned. Honestly, it wasn't.
You're a natural coach. It's good. It's good.
Talk to me more about that. Talk to us more about that.
Okay, so this is actually a really important skill. Everyone's so obsessed with asking questions, they forget to focus on this, in my opinion, when you look at kind of coaching advice out there. This is the ability of the leader to paraphrase or summarize back to the person what they think they've heard. And you can either do it intentionally using the same phrases or words that they have used. And I write down one word notes as I'm going so that I can use those words back to people. Or you might intentionally frame it in a completely different way back to them. And you can say like something like, it sounds like da 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 da. Or let me just check if I understood that correctly. Da 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 da. So you're kind of offering it up as your current understanding, and you can absolutely put into that your thinking. Like, it doesn't have to be neutral. You can put into that your thinking of, well, it sounds like you're sharing a lot of things which it feels like really weighty to me. It feels like you're carrying a lot of responsibility and weight to what you're saying. I've absolutely interpreted what they've said with my own feeling of this feels heavy. I'm reflecting my feeling back to them. So I have added my feeling into the conversation. It's not completely pure non-directive coaching, but it is then enabling them to see something that's different. So for example, I said something to someone the other day. I said, this sounds like it's a non-reversible one-shot only decision, but actually you've already told me that you're experimenting with lots of different things. Why is this different? And they were immediately able to then see like, oh no, this isn't, I'm putting loads of pressure on getting this decision right. I can do this completely differently. So you're reflecting, summarizing, possibly with a question at the end, what you're seeing.
And I was going to say that if you summarize, I think the thing around saying my understanding is this is really important. I think in some of the research about listening skills, if you just paraphrase back without that caveat, it can break rapport and make someone feel like that you're just parroting back without adding anything to it isn't a good way of doing it. But okay, I've listened and my understanding is this. Can I just check that I've understood this correctly? That in itself turns into a curious question because you're leaving it open for them to add, agree or disagree, which can be helpful too. And because no one's listening, if you're stuck, that can be a helpful thing to do that summary to make sure that there is the shared understanding, but it can often lead the conversation off into the kind of the next part.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. My other favorite thing to do in this part is to contrast something that they've just said with something that they said earlier. So you're presenting to them potentially a incongruous feeling or belief or something that's in tension with itself, but it might not be, and their way of thinking about it might actually hold those two truths very comfortably simultaneously at the same time, but presenting it back to them as being, you've just mentioned this earlier, you said that, help me understand how those two connect. And the question there was open, so it's not is there a connection between those two, and they say no, help me understand how those two connect. And they may think and go, I really can't think of anything. Like, that's fine, move on to something else, but making connections for the person you're leading is really helpful.
And I love the phrase in that, help me understand, because they might not have seen any connection whatsoever at all, and because you're not them and you're one or more steps removed, you can make some of those connections that they may not have been able to because they're too close to everything that's going on, which I find when someone's coaching me is massively helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so can we move on to the fourth skill? Or is there anything else you want to say about summarizing? Okay, cool. So goal focused and ownership. And I think sometimes this can be difficult because you might have had a conversation with somebody that's, shared their feelings, and then it can feel like a switch into, okay, well, what are we doing next? So help me understand some of your tips and tactics.
Asking me good coaching questions. So there are different styles of coaching conversation, and this might be a 2-minute corridor conversation. This might be a lengthier conversation because someone's come to you with a lot of emotion. So there are completely different styles of coaching conversation that you might have. But the way you can wrap it up, if it's a fairly non-emotion
Hmm.
based coaching conversation, and there isn't too much of a change of gear, then just being really clear to ask questions about what do you plan to do next? When do you plan to do that? Do you need any help or assistance in doing that? So that you're just inviting them to say, this is what I'm going to do by this date, and I need the following, or no, I can do this alone. So you're helping them to create commitment to the actions and be really clear about who's responsible for that. So where there isn't a shift in gear, it's relatively straightforward. And it's just remembering that you're now switching back more into slightly leader role with regards to setting accountability and delegation. When someone's shared deeper emotion, which doesn't have to happen in coaching, coaching can be quite surface level, but it can go deep. Then often what you can do is reflect back to them the fact that we're kind of wrapping up this conversation. There are other opportunities for us to discuss this in future times. How would you like to go away and reflect on this? Would you like to come back to me with some reflections? Actually, that was a closed question. But so the kind of inviting them to say what they need to do next. And if it's really raw emotion, as sometimes happens in my conversations with people, I'll normally default to what could you do next to really take care of yourself in the next 30 minutes?
I love that question.
So that actually they know when, because I'm doing Zoom calls, so I'm not physically with them, they know what they are going to do to self-care, to take care of themselves immediately on ending that call. And I'm feeling confident that they have a plan to what they're going to do next in terms of moving on with their day.
And there's something around sort of agency in that. So, what do you think the next steps might look like or might be? Or I like the question, well, because sometimes if you've discussed something really big, I like the question, well, what's the first next step then? And then what's the next step after that? Chunking it down into small things. And often once somebody starts working on the first step, the other steps start to build momentum. But first next step.
Yeah, keep it small, especially if it's feeling like someone's a bit overwhelmed by the kind of the scale, or if there's something that's needing courage from the individual that you're leading, then what's that first next step? And then looping back sometimes to what could stop you. So you might loop back into some curious questions at this point before then wrapping up, what could stop you from doing that, and how can you overcome that barrier or prevent that from happening?
Or how can I help you overcome that if it's a sort of leader team member conversation can be helpful. And sometimes that might be an organizational thing, how can I clear the path for you, can be a helpful question.
Absolutely. So I think regardless of what the conversation has been, that step might look different, but it has to have some kind of goal focused ownership element of making sure that you as the leader are not now taking away a huge list of actions. This isn't the purpose. You're empowering the other person to take away a whole list of actions and to know when and how to ask for help again.
So as a leader, you are signaling that you're there, for the next step to help. You can have a similar conversation again, but you're giving them the permission and the autonomy to take those next steps.
And the great thing about role modeling this in a way that you actually label it, you could use the word coaching or whatever other label you want to use. You have 2 or 3 conversations with that person, depending on the individual and their natural skill set. If you keep asking the same questions, they're kind of going to stop coming to you just to have those questions asked to them. So they're going to start asking themselves the questions. Oh, yes, if I go back to Juliet, she's going to ask that really annoying question again. I may as well ask myself the question and figure out my next step on my own. I don't really need guidance to do this. So you're training people to coach themselves or indeed each other through the process without you necessarily being as actively involved.
Agreed. And there's an element in that of, people coming to you, having done a bit of thinking. They might not have all the solutions, but they've done some of that initial thinking, which is extremely helpful, both in terms of their development and the time that you are then spending together with whatever the bit is where they've got a bit stuck or might need a bit of coaching.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got my eye on the time, and I feel like this has been a great episode, but I feel that is there anything else you want to say about coaching as a sort of leadership skill before we wrap up?
I think it's one of the most powerful leadership tools there is. So the only thing I would say is, if this doesn't feel like you're doing it naturally now, and you may have listened to this whole thing and said, well, I'm doing all of that, I just didn't label it as such.
Brilliant,
that's great.
Yeah.
But anyone who has too much on their plate, struggles with delegating, or has mindset shifts that they need to make around delegating, wants to find a way of up leveling the performance, so kind of leading a high performing team, this is an amazing skill to practice, to hone, to just start to sprinkle into what you're doing. And it can be minutes here and there. It's not whole sessions with people. I think it's really powerful. So just encourage you to give it a try and let us know. Let us know what gets stuck. What do you enjoy? What kind of successes do you have? Where does it fall down? And of course, there are times when coaching isn't the right approach to take. As a leader, you need to take different approaches as well.
I agree. And Juliet, I know you coach leaders. If anyone's listening to this and thinking that they wanted to improve their coaching skills with their team, or thinking, actually, maybe I could experience coaching that could help, what are the sorts of things that you help people with?
Yeah, so I help experienced leaders to solve really complex problems through coaching, strategy advice, that kind of thing. And actually, interestingly, some of the clients that I work with, the goals that we set at the beginning of our work can include, I want to become a more coaching style leader myself. So what I'm doing in those sessions is helping them to experience being coached, but also to kind of mentor them through how they can then coach their teams. So if that's of interest, then let me know. And even if you're not ready yet, maybe you're an aspiring leader, and at some point you will be an experienced leader. But if you're not ready yet for that kind of one-to-one work, then do join my mailing list, my email list. If you just head to the website, I'll put the link on the episode notes, because I write about this stuff on a weekly basis.
Fabulous.
How about you, Lucy? You're obviously working more with teams than individuals, but it all overlaps, right?
It all overlaps, yes. I'm much more about gathering people together and helping them to solve complex problems. So whether that is a kind of a team day, a workshop, a lot of what we've talked about here today is what I do with whole groups of people. Help me understand what's not working, what's blocking progress, how we as a collective feeling about X, Y, and Z, whatever it is we have to do. And if you're interested in having a conversation about that, again, my email address is in the show notes. Just get in touch.
Fantastic. Wonderful. I think we're ready to wrap up. I could talk for another 24 hours on this, but I've got a feeling that people wouldn't necessarily listen that long. So I think we should probably wrap up now. What do you think, Lucy?
With regret, I agree.
Yes, indeed. So thank you for spending this time with us. I'm Juliet Corbett, an executive coach and strategist working one-to-one with senior leaders.
And I'm Lucy Gower, a facilitator, trainer and coach helping leaders develop high-performing teams. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with colleagues and help leverage the impact of the quiet leadership revolution.